Hello everyone. We're going to start here a new chapter called Transaction Control Language, also known as TCL. And under this chapter, first topic is Introduction to TCL. Let's discuss what are these TCL commands. These commands they are used to manage the transaction made by insert, update, and delete statements. So what is meant by managing transaction? Managing transaction means either you wanna start a transaction, you wanna execute that transaction, or you wanna save the changes, or you wanna undo the changes inside the transaction. Now let's study what is transaction. A transaction can have one or more SQL statements. So this is our transaction and it have three different SQL statements. We have three different update statements here. So this is our transaction, and transaction has to follow certain characteristics or it has some properties. Very first property is atomicity. A transaction is atomic. What does it mean? Either all the operations in this transaction will execute successfully or none of them. What does that mean? Let's imagine if these operations fails for some reason, then all the operations inside the transaction will not be executed. What is meant by consistency? Let's say it has a starting state. I will write S, and it has ending state. A transaction has to go from one valid state, that is our starting state, to the next valid state. What does that mean? A transaction has to follow some predefined rules such as constraints, triggers, or cascading. Consider this balance cannot be negative, right? And imagine if I start executing this transaction and I have zero balance and then I subtract minus 1000, the output will be minus 1000, and we fail that condition, we fail that constraint on this balance. Now this transaction will not be executed. When we started, it was in valid state, it was following a rule of non-negative constraint, but when it reach here, it's not following. That's why this transaction is not consistent. So transaction has a consistency before starting the transaction and after ending the transaction. Isolation. A transaction has to be treated as an isolated transaction. Just imagine we have this transaction and you have one more transaction, and these are similar transactions. So this transaction cannot see intermediate state. Let's say this state. When you are executing this transaction, you reach here. So this second transaction cannot see this state. It has to complete all those operations, then it will be able to see the changes in this transaction at the end. So this is called isolation. Durability. Once you completed all the transaction, then even though there is a system failure or database crash, your data has to be stored permanently, or your changes has to be stored permanently. That's called the durability. So these are the four different properties here: atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability, also known as acid. And there are also three different commands that we are going to study, and these commands they are used to control these operations. Rollback is your first command, SAVEPOINT is your second, and commit is third. Let's discuss them in detail.